The day my college acceptance letter arrived should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I remember holding the envelope in my hands, staring at my name printed neatly on the front, my heart racing with excitement and fear mixed together. Years of late-night studying, sacrificing weekends, and believing in a future bigger than my small bedroom had finally paid off. I imagined my parents smiling, maybe even hugging me. I imagined my father proudly telling relatives, "My child got into college." I imagined my mother planning how we would manage things together. I wasn't asking for luxury, just support. That evening, I placed the letter carefully on the dining table. My parents were sitting across from me, the same table where we had shared hundreds of meals, arguments, and quiet moments. The air felt normal, but something inside me felt tense. "I got accepted," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother picked up the letter and skimmed through it. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. There was no celebration, no congratulations, just silence. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "So," he said, "how are you planning to pay for it?" I blinked, confused. I thought, we could talk about it together. "I'll apply for scholarships and work part-time, but..." He cut me off. "No, we think it's time you learn independence." My stomach dropped. My mother nodded slowly, as if they had rehearsed this moment. "We raised you well," she said. "You're smart, strong. You don't need us to carry you anymore." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not asking to be carried," I said quietly. "I'm just asking for help." My father leaned forward. "When we were young, no one helped us. We struggled. That's how we learned responsibility." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that times were different, that tuition wasn't what it used to be, that they were financially comfortable. They owned their home. They took vacations. They paid for my younger siblings' private school without hesitation. But I stayed calm. "Even a little help would make a difference," I said. "I'll pay you back." My mother's face hardened. "No. If we help you now, you'll always expect it. Independence doesn't come with conditions." That word, independence, hung in the air like a verdict. In that moment, I realized their decision wasn't about money. It was about control. About teaching a lesson they believed in more than they believed in me. I excused myself and went to my room. I sat on my bed, staring at the walls I had grown up with, walls that suddenly felt temporary. I replayed the conversation over and over, hoping I had misunderstood something. But I hadn't. Later that night, my father knocked on my door. "You'll be 18 soon," he said. "You need to stand on your own feet." I asked him one last time, "So you're really not helping at all?" He shook his head. "No." That was it. The next few days felt surreal. I filled out loan applications, searched for cheap housing, and applied for jobs. Each form reminded me that I was officially alone. Friends talked excitedly about dorm life and family support. I smiled and nodded, hiding the knot in my throat. On move-out day, my parents watched as I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases. No hugs. No tears. Just quiet approval, as if this emotional distance was proof they had done the right thing. As I stood at the door, my mother said, "This will make you stronger." I wanted to ask, stronger than what? Stronger than feeling abandoned. But I didn't. I walked out without looking back. That night, in a tiny rented room with peeling paint and a broken heater, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Fear wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. What if I failed? What if they were right and I wasn't ready? But beneath the fear was something else, determination. If they wanted me to be independent, I would be. Not because they forced me, but because I refused to let their decision define my limits. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, the quiet refusal at the dinner table, was the beginning of a journey that would change everything. College did not feel like the fresh start everyone promised. For me, it felt like survival. My alarm rang at 4:30 every morning in the tiny room I rented behind a closed-down grocery store. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and the mattress sagged in the middle like it had given up years ago. I would lie there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, reminding myself why I was doing this. Then I'd get up, pull on my uniform, and step into the cold. My first job was cleaning offices before sunrise. I emptied trash cans, wiped desks, and mopped floors that would be dirty again by noon. Most days, no one noticed me. I was invisible, and honestly, that was fine. I just needed the paycheck. After that shift, I rushed straight to campus. I often attended lectures smelling faintly of disinfectant, my hands rough from cleaning chemicals. I sat in the back, fighting sleep, taking notes with fingers that sometimes shook from exhaustion. Money controlled every decision I made. I skipped meals. I bought used textbooks with missing pages. I avoided social events because even a coffee felt expensive. While other students talked about parties and weekend trips home, I calculated how many hours I'd need to work to afford groceries. There were moments of deep loneliness. I watched parents help their kids move into dorms, carrying boxes, offering hugs, slipping them extra cash. I pretended not to care, but the ache in my chest told the truth. I called my parents once during my first semester. I didn't ask for money. I just needed to hear a familiar voice. My father asked, "So, still managing on your own?" "Yes," I said. "Good," he replied. "That means the lesson is working." The call lasted less than 2 minutes. By my second year, I had added more jobs, waiting tables at night and delivering food on weekends. My schedule was brutal. Some days, I worked 16 hours, slept 4, and repeated it all again. Burnout wasn't a concept, it was my reality. There were times I almost quit. Once, after failing an exam because I'd worked a double shift the night before, I sat in the campus bathroom and cried silently. I wondered if my parents would feel satisfied if I gave up. I wondered if independence was worth this much pain. But quitting would mean proving them right, that I wasn't strong enough. So I kept going. Slowly, I adapted. I learned how to budget down to the last dollar. I learned which grocery stores discounted food at night. I learned how to study efficiently during short breaks. I learned resilience not from motivational speeches, but from necessity. By the time I graduated, 1 year later than planned, I didn't walk across the stage feeling proud. I felt relieved. I had survived. The real test came after graduation. I entered the workforce with student loans hanging over me like a shadow. I took the first job offer I could get, even though the pay was low. I lived in shared apartments with strangers. I saved every extra dollar. Promotions came slowly, but I earned them. My parents watched from a distance. Occasionally, they'd send messages, "Hope work is going well." I replied politely, briefly. They never asked if I needed help. I never offered updates. The emotional gap grew wider each year. As time passed, I stopped expecting anything from them, not support, not approval, not understanding. I learned to rely only on myself. That kind of independence changes you. It hardens some parts of your heart, sharpens others. By the time 5 years had passed, I was no longer struggling to survive. I had stability, a decent apartment, a routine that didn't involve constant panic. But the relationship with my parents remained frozen in that moment at the dinner table years ago. They had taught me independence, just as they intended. What they hadn't realized was that independence also meant emotional distance, and I was learning how to live without them just as well as I had learned to live without their money. 9 years passed faster than I expected. Life stopped feeling like a constant emergency. I no longer checked my bank balance every morning with dread. I had a stable job, a promotion, and a quiet routine that felt earned rather than borrowed. My apartment was small but comfortable, filled with furniture I had paid for myself. Every object in it represented a step taken alone. I didn't think much about my parents anymore. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had settled into something manageable, like an old scar. It didn't bleed, but I felt it whenever I was reminded of where I came from. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. We hadn't spoken properly in years. Occasional holiday messages, short check-ins, that was it. "Hello," I said. Her voice sounded unfamiliar. Older. Softer. "It's me." I was wondering, could we talk? Something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't calling to give advice or check on my independence. She sounded unsure, almost nervous. We agreed to meet at my parents' house that weekend. When I arrived, the house looked the same, but everything felt different. The paint was faded. The garden was overgrown. Time had left its mark in quiet ways. My father opened the door. He looked smaller than I remembered. His hair was gray now, his posture slightly hunched. He forced a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come in," he said. We sat in the living room, the same room where they had once told me I was on my own. The silence stretched uncomfortably. My mother clasped her hands together, twisting her fingers. Finally, she spoke. "We've been thinking a lot lately." I waited. My father cleared his throat. "We thought we were doing the right thing back then." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He continued, slower now. "We believed that pushing you to be independent would prepare you for life. But over the years, we watched you succeed without us." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "And we realized something was wrong." She looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing the distance for the first time. "We weren't part of your journey. We missed everything." For the first time, I saw regret, not defensiveness, not pride. Regret. They told me how they followed my career quietly, through relatives and social media. How they felt proud but disconnected. How family gatherings felt incomplete without me. How they told themselves I'd come back once I understood their lesson. "I don't think we understood the cost," my father admitted. The words hit harder than I expected. I finally spoke. "You taught me how to survive," I said. "But you also taught me that I couldn't rely on you." My father lowered his head. "That wasn't our intention. But it was the result," I replied calmly. They apologized. Not the kind of apology that tries to explain itself, but one that accepts responsibility. My mother cried openly. My father's voice cracked. "We're sorry we weren't there when you needed us most," he said. "We can't change the past, but we don't want to lose you forever." I felt a mix of emotions, validation, sadness, relief, and exhaustion. I had imagined this conversation many times over the years, but now that it was happening, I realized forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I also can't pretend nothing happened." They nodded. They didn't argue. That mattered. We talked for hours. About the years we missed. About how independence had shaped me, and hardened me. About how their idea of strength had cost us closeness. When I left that evening, nothing was magically fixed. But something had shifted. For the first time in 9 years, the distance between us wasn't enforced by pride. It was acknowledged. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. After that evening, nothing changed all at once. I didn't wake up the next morning feeling healed or forgiven. The past didn't disappear just because it had finally been acknowledged. But something subtle had shifted, like a door unlocked after years of being shut. I could see the other side now, even if I wasn't ready to step through it. My parents started reaching out more. Not with advice, not with expectations, just messages. "How was your day?" At first, I replied briefly. Polite, careful, distant. Old habits don't vanish overnight. They didn't push. That mattered. Weeks passed, then months. We met for coffee instead of family dinners. Neutral spaces felt safer. Sometimes the conversations were awkward. Other times, surprisingly normal. We talked about books, weather, work, everything except the years we lost. One afternoon, my father surprised me. "I've been thinking about the word, independence," he said quietly. "I used to believe it meant not needing anyone." He looked at his hands. "Now I think it means choosing who you let in." That sentence stayed with me. I realized independence hadn't just shaped my career, it had shaped my boundaries. I no longer stayed in situations that drained me. I no longer waited for approval. I built a life where stability came from within, not from promises. But independence also taught me something else. Distance can protect you, but it can also isolate you. One evening, my mother invited me over for dinner. She cooked my favorite meal from childhood. The table felt familiar, but I was different now. I noticed the effort she put into everything, the way she asked instead of assumed, listened instead of instructed. Halfway through the meal, she said, "If we could do it again, we would help you." I didn't respond immediately. "I know," I said finally. "But I can't go back and be the person I was then." She nodded. "We don't expect that." That was the moment I understood something important. Reconciliation isn't about erasing the past, it's about accepting the version of each other that exists now. Over time, trust returned in small pieces. Not the unquestioning trust of childhood, but something more honest. Something earned. They never tried to take credit for my success. They never said, "See, our method worked." Instead, they respected the life I had built alone. And I respected the fact that they were trying. I paid attention to the lessons I carried forward. When younger cousins talked about college, I encouraged them to ask for help, and to offer it when they could. I learned that strength isn't measured by how much you endure alone, but by how well you balance independence with connection. 9 years ago, my parents refused to support my education. At the time, it felt like rejection. Like abandonment disguised as a lesson. But time gave me clarity. Their decision forced me to grow faster than I should have had to. It gave me resilience, discipline, and self-trust. But it also showed me the emotional cost of tough love when it lacks compassion. Today, my relationship with my parents isn't perfect, but it's real. We meet in the middle. They respect my independence. I allow them back into my life, on my terms. And that is the part they didn't expect. Regret doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes, it becomes the beginning of understanding. The story didn't end with revenge or dramatic justice. It ended with boundaries, growth, and a quiet truth. You can be independent, and still choose connection.